Just wondering if you could share a couple of examples as to how on earth they manage that, because I mean, there's a massive change from what, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, how?
Absolutely. And so Agile Immersive specialty is making numbers go from 75 to 1100. So that's what we do for a living. The mindset shift to increase psychological safety in an organization comes across five primary factors.
With change management, and so we also need an expert in communication. And for me, you are one of the best communicators I've met so far.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
But maybe Thomas, you introduce a little bit yourself, because I don't know what is your current level right now. Maybe introduce yourself a little bit for the students from your background, what are you doing, what are your main focus, and yeah, thank you so much. We are curious to your presentation.
So Martin and I met. He mentioned the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers, ISPE. I've been on the leadership team, both at the global strategy as well as at the working group level, to think about how do we make real the promises and the expectations of Pharma 4.0. As we, as a team here at Agile Immersive, as well as with ISPE Global, think about how do we make real the promises of automation and artificial intelligence, predictive analytics as it relates to manufacturing pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. Is there something about the culture, specifically within our organizations, as we shift to more automation? Is there something about psychological safety that we should be concerned with? This conversation is about some of the corollary effects that we've discovered. They're fascinating. Fear is, now this is, and the way I lecture, it's a conversation. So I'm going to ask you a question. Anyone in class right now, tell me, does this woman exhibit psychological safety? All right. I heard a no. Who said no? Okay, right? All right. Front row, second to the left. Explain why. Why is this woman not experiencing psychological safety?
She looks trapped and she thinks she almost tripping over the border, standing on a skyscraper. With a just a background.
Yeah, right? She is on the edge and she is afraid of falling off the edge. She's literally afraid of potentially of dying. So what's really interesting and fascinating as we examine human beings, both individually and at scale, is that human beings in our amygdala emit a series of neurochemicals that cause us to be sometimes paralyzed with fear and to respond to circumstances. Obviously, if you're on the edge of a skyscraper, you're going to be very afraid. But do you know that if you have a fear of presenting in front of a group of people, for instance, or there's a young person that you're interested in, you want to date, and you're standing in front of them, sometimes the same neurochemicals that bathe our amygdala and cause us to be bathed in fear, paralyzed in fear, can also be emitted in that construct, in that moment. So as we examine fear, which is the opposite of psychological safety, we have come to discover that fear can scale. What happens, anyone just yell it out, what happens when fear scales up from an individual to masses of hundreds of people. Exactly. This is a mob. This is a stampede. Unfortunately, this is a stampede that actually resulted in people losing their lives. What's fascinating about human beings is that fear can scale by milliseconds. We have innate ability to both hear, sense, feel fear, especially primal fear, from the people next to us, and we can respond instantaneously. That instantaneous response to fear leads to stampedes, leads to mobs. Has anyone ever felt afraid in a crowd? Anyone? Do you know, as you have your hands up, from in the back row, give me an example of when were you afraid in a crowd? Just yell it out.
Concert.
In a concert, okay. Was it a death metal concert? Is that why you were afraid?
No, actually, it was just in the city in a festival, but they let too many people in a too small space.
Yes, yes. So everyone was cramped together, and you felt constricted, right? Yeah. All right. Who else? Who else has been afraid in a crowd? Yeah. What was your circumstance? Like, what? Why were you afraid?
Yeah, it's similar. It was waiting in front of a club where nothing was structured. The waiting lines were not structured. Everyone wants to go through a small door at once. So.
Yeah. So lots of people, one door, and no order. So everyone's constricted. Everyone's pressed in. And so you feel like you can't. We human beings have a collective response. We have an ability to collectively respond to stimulus. Now, here's a bonus question. From our primitive past, why would human beings have a built-in ability to collectively respond to fear? Saber-toothed tiger, right? Lion, wild boars. Like we always have faced a collective through our history and prehistory. Human beings have always sometimes experienced collective stimuli. So that's why we have an innate ability to collectively respond. Today's conversation is going to use a question. We're going to talk about psychological safety. We're going to make some key assumptions. We're going to reveal the spectrum that we have discovered with our research. And then we're going to talk about some conclusions. When we talk about the spectral analysis of automation efforts, we're going to actually talk about 5 companies, real companies, but we're going to anonymize their identities so that we can talk about them freely. I know some of you in that room probably work for a couple of them. So we have to protect, everyone's interest, in this conversation. Our hypothesis is pharmaceutical manufacturers that balance their investment in automation while enhancing psychological safety will realize an observable reduction in manufacturing waste per year. Now we put 5%. We put 5% so that we can have a quantitative benchmark. However, what we're really saying is if there's a reduction in waste, we should be able to see it and potentially make a corollary comparison between psychological safety within those organizations and automation and the resultant efficiencies gained or efficiencies lost as a result of that investment. Okay? You guys follow me with the hypothesis? Any questions? All right. Let's go ahead and talk about So,
Sorry, what do you mean with enhancing the psychological safety in this case? Does it mean you're going for automation and your employees are afraid of being of losing their jobs, and so you going against this worries of your employees, or is it something else?
right. Marvelous question. When we say psychological safety, the next slide is a definition for it, but so let me just use that slide to answer that question directly. Okay. All right. So when we say psychological safety, we mean that the employee's value as an individual contributor, words and actions are highly regarded, notwithstanding their content. In other words, to answer your question now with that definition directly, an employee is psychologically safe when they can use words and actions that are either positive or adverse to their employer, and they are respected and regarded notwithstanding what they just said or did. So the automation, the increased use of artificial intelligence, all of the drives for higher efficiency include that employee, their value, their words, and their actions, no matter how they feel about all the things we just said. Does that answer your question?
Yes, for yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So an employee who feels that he is taken at face value is someone who is psychologically safe.
Precisely. An employee whose value as an individual contributor to the organization, whose words and actions, even if it's adverse, in other words, even if that employee is challenging status quo, challenging management, challenging executives, challenging automation, that employee is psychologically safe if they are allowed to continue to do that with attribution. And when we say with attribution, that means they can post their real feelings with their name and their contact information, either internally to the company or externally on social media, etc. Now we have a measure. I love the questions you're asking, because it's like, let's dive into how does Agile Immersive measure psychological safety? We've spent time examining psychological safety so much that we've come up with what we call the PS Index, or the Psychological Safety Index. It's a proprietary measure of attributed employee feedback divided by anonymous feedback multiplied by 100. We describe this as the felt psychological safety of an employee. We have a proprietary way to take a core sample. We can literally take a core sample of a company's attributed feedback and anonymous feedback over the course of years, from 2018, in this case, to 2022. And you're going to see this feedback in just a moment. We've aggregated it and summarized it in some tables and some visualization. But the important notion is that if think about it, I mean, you're in class right now. If Martin were to say to you, if Dr. Schwarm, I don't know if you guys call him Martin, Dr. Schwarm were to tell you that your thesis that you're working on needs XYZ, updates, and you were a little bit, hurt, your feelings were a little bit hurt by what he said to you in that particular one-on-one session. If you are psychologically safe with Martin or Dr. Schwarm, you would be able to, maybe the next day or a week from then, when you collect your thoughts, you would be able to say to him either face to face, send him an email with your name and say, hey, listen, this is how you made me feel. I'm going to tell you the truth. It's not going to be pleasant, but because I'm psychologically safe, I can. If you were not, that's attribution. If you were not psychologically safe with Dr. Schwarm, you would go on the Goethe Graduate School of Business for Pharma homepage and maybe social media listing, and maybe type an anonymous note. Dr. Swarm is really mean, and he says cruel things that make me cry. You know, Martin, I'm assuming that's not true, right?
No comment.
All right. Okay, Martin. Maybe we need to do a core sample of your class here. Okay, but anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
I have a question.
Of course.
Are we thinking that psychological safety is something in response to the person or something else in front of us, or is it something within us?
It is a combination of all the above. Okay? So, again, a marvelous question. The reason why we define trustworthiness just above psychological safety on the chart there, trustworthiness, and this is an important note for you. In all the manufacturing companies that we're about to show you the data from, trustworthiness was the precondition that had to be established for the psychological safety actions and programs and words to actually mean something. In other words, if you don't trust the organization that you're in, you cannot be psychologically safe. Anyone here, tell me, does this woman feel psychologically safe?
Sure. It depends on if the balloons are filled with helium and there's much wind outside. Most likely, yeah.
I would agree that if there's not too much helium in these balloons and not too much wind, this woman running on the beach with balloons is probably feeling psychologically safe. A lot different from our woman on the edge. You would agree, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Has anyone ever seen a movie where you're laughing at the movie, you're enjoying the movie in the movie theater, and because people around you are also laughing and enjoying themselves, you feel even more elation, even more joy because of their joy? Has that ever happened to anyone in a Yes. Now, in the back row, I saw that hand. What was the movie? You got to tell us.
Well, it's too long ago, and there were several movies where this happened. I have no name right now.
Okay, no worries. Listen, when I watched, what did I watch? So I watched Coming to America 2, an Eddie Murphy. I'm an Eddie Murphy fan. Eddie Murphy movie. I watched it in a movie theater. The people around me laughed at things I wouldn't have laughed at by myself. But because they were cackling and laughter, it made it a little bit more fun for me to also participate in their laughter as they're responding to the screen. You know, many of us have experienced literally a sense of elation. And by the way, there's also neurochemical responses in our brain to joy, happiness, and elation, which is also contagious. So joy and happiness and a felt experience of safety is also contagious. Okay? So as we explore the spectrums, let's just keep that in the back of our minds. All right? All right, let's dive in. So we've already told you which companies that we've done evaluations on, the major pharmas. We're going to call them companies A, B, C, D, E for the sake of this evaluation. And we're going to use the PS index from attribution and non-attribution and anonymous feedback that we did core samples on. And then we pulled waste metrics. Now, let me say right offhand, as we go from 2018 to 2022, obviously, waste metrics are going to be impacted by dozens and dozens of variables beyond automation investment and psychological safety. Obviously, yes, we know that. Okay. All we're looking for is there a corollary, an observable trend that could be related to psychological safety and automation? It's a question we're asking. Is it possible? Okay. So all you data scientists out there who are like about to start exploring variables and start asking questions about that, relax. We're just looking for corollary. Okay. And we have data scientists on our team too, by the way. So we sometimes you want to look at the broadest possible trend before you start drilling down, looking for both lagging indicators and leading indicators. Okay. So consider this the broadest possible conversation. And let's define waste. Who here is actually a part of pharma manufacturing, biotech manufacturing, and understands and can just quickly explain the byproducts of waste that happen in manufacturing? Anyone? Go ahead.
I'm not anymore. I used to be in the production, but since 3 years I'm not anymore in the production. But in general, just saying what the byproducts, it depends on when it's out of spec because of cosmetics or whatever. You drop it out of the production, most likely, for example, I don't know, when you have injectables, you have the filling process, something is overfilled, underfilled. So in general, things which are in course of the whole production out of spec, and you define it in your line, then it already gets kicked out.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah. So waste, in the broadest possible terms, is a byproduct that's unusable. Okay. So you would agree that if we're more efficient, if we're driving up efficiency with our investment in automation and psychological safety, if we're driving up efficiency, waste over time would trend what way?
Yeah, the waste would go down. So I assume when people are more safe, so when they have more psychological safety, I think they would be more willing to tell, I don't know, the supervisor what mistakes are happening. They would be more looking for failures. They would be more realizing when there are mistakes or things are going wrong, and then based on this, they can reduce it, and therefore the waste will go down.
Precisely. Well said. And in our experience and in our analysis on individual companies, as psychological safety goes up, that is, I as an individual employee, we as a team of employees feel safe enough to say adverse things, negative things about how things are manufactured, how things are produced now, so that we can do something, we can take action to fix it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just was agreeing.
Oh, okay.
I just
Excellent.
realized that in my former company, we especially had this problem that I was, how to say, how to translate it? So it was like, how to say, blue collar, white collar. Just to, it was art separation, and we got a new CEO because many problems in the manufacturing area were never communicated, and we got a new CEO, and he just realized it and started really going in all the departments, took time with the people, talked to the people, increased the safety for the people because they related to each other, and by this year we were able to just reduce the whole waste. So that we're on.
Excellent. Yeah. So when we evaluate from 2018 to 2022, we see that there's a number of data trends that we observe. Again, only correlated data trends, not dependent or independent or causal or effect. Okay. Again, I'm saying that for the sake of data scientists and the mathematicians in the room. Okay. All right. So
in the case of company D, where was it D? I think where the PS index went up to 1,000.
1100. Yep.
I was just wondering if you could share a couple of examples as to how on earth they manage that, because I mean, there's a massive change from what, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, how? You said that they invested, so obviously they put a budget, a price tag, a massive price tag, and the minds to it. But can you share some paradigms, some examples as to how they get there?
Absolutely. And so Agile Immersive specialty is making numbers go from 75 to 1100. So that's what we do for a living. The mindset shift to increase psychological safety in an organization comes across 5 primary factors, okay? The awareness of the executive team, the purpose of the organization and the purpose of the individual product lines, the orientation, that is both the market orientation and the orientation of the entire industry. So the orientation both of the individual product line, the company, as well as the market is a factor. The goals, the stated goals and the implied goals of the executive team, and then the cadence, the pace at which products are brought to market, feedback is incorporated from end consumers, doctors, hospitals, hospital systems, creates an ecosystem of felt, experienced psychological safety. Now, I said a lot of words across a lot of dimensions, but I just wanted to give you an honest answer. It takes an enormous intentional focus to go from 75 to 1100, both financial, both in terms of will, executive commitment, and follow through. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. So there's two things I will probably take away as messages moving forward for my day to day, and the number one will probably be purpose, and also I, at least between the lines, I sort of heard vision, whether it's from a company perspective or product group or business unit, whatever the setting is that we're working on, and communicating those probably across the different settings to create. I know that when you said ecosystem, you didn't just mean it in a buzzword sense that most do.
No.
Like a conglomerate of like different factors that come in together to create that. So you did answer the question. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Appreciate that. All right, it's a great question. All right, so
I have one quick one. The waste, the metric tons that you have there, are those from the companies in the same field, small molecules or
it's
OSD? What is it?
so Martin, that's an excellent question. These are the aggregated, publicly reported waste numbers for companies A through E. Okay, so like from stock reports, from shareholder reports, from ESG compliance reporting. Okay, it's aggregated waste per company. That's public.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, a couple of other observations that are interesting. And Martin, I know I'm a little bit on time. Can I just go for a few more minutes?
Yes.
Oh, okay. When, another conclusion that we draw is that when PS is not tended, not protected, then automation efforts do not seem to lead to the same sustained efficiencies over time. In other words, company C is an example of the biggest waffling. I mean, company C goes from 100 to 700, drops to 400, goes back to 700, and is at 600 in 2022. When there's waffling, our analysis is that there's literally observable waffling in executive and leadership intent and actions and words to employees that regard them as trusted and psychologically safe. In other words, some companies are really good at steady and growth, and some companies struggle with keeping sustained efforts, maintaining and building trust. Okay, and that's what we see in company C. Now we also see another thing in company A, and that is when PS and automation is decoupled or is not intentionally sustained over time, there is also a waffling effect, which may have an effect on waste generation and inefficiency. And so that's why we see company A has this, if we kind of look at the visual, company A, of all the companies that we evaluated, is the only company that plateaued in terms of waste reduction, actually increased and then plateaued in terms of waste reduction. All the other companies had some observable total decrease in inefficiency over time. Companies B, C, D, and E. Company A was not able to sustain a reduction in inefficiencies with its investments in automation and psychological safety.